The inn stood slightly away from the village. Small, clean, and always quiet. It wasn't the kind of place where dramatic things happened. Every morning, the innkeeper cleaned the inn, checked the stew and the hearth, and polished the bowls. He didn't speak much, but his silence felt warm rather than cold. With few guests, his days were quiet and predictable. A rhythm he had long grown comfortable with. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills, a lone mercenary stepped inside. Dusty boots, tired eyes, and a silence heavier than the air around him. He spoke only once. A room, one night. The innkeeper nodded, noticing the mercenary's trembling hands and his averted gaze. By the fire, the mercenary exhaled slowly. A breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for months. He asked for a single drink and held the cup with a careful grip. The warmth softened the stiffness in his shoulders. After a long silence, he finally spoke again. "I've spent my whole life fighting," he murmured. "More battles than any man should endure." He explained that while others pillaged freely, he never touched the fallen. He wanted no blood. He didn't need to spill. For the first time in years, he said softly, "I was finally heading home." But bandits emerged from the roadside. He fought only to survive. And one of them died by his blade. The one who died was the youngest among them. A few nights later, on the outskirts of a small village, a poor but kind villager offered him a corner of his room. "It's better to keep out of the wind," the man said with a gentle smile. The next morning, he learned the truth. The villager's younger brother was the bandit he had killed. He said his brother had been a good young man, but hunger after the failed harvest pushed him to theft, and he hadn't been able to stop him. "I've ended many lives," he said, "but this one won't leave me." The innkeeper didn't try to comfort him. He simply listened, steady, present, and kind. "I don't know why this man troubles me so deeply," he whispered. "Why him? Why now?" "Sometimes," the innkeeper murmured, The smallest regret is the XD one that stays the longest. They sat together in the soft glow of the fire, sharing a silence that felt strangely warm. The mercenary set down his empty cup. A small, wordless farewell. At dawn, he packed quietly and nodded once. Then he stepped back onto the long road. The inn grew quiet again, but the silence felt subtly changed. The innkeeper looked at the empty seat and murmured, "There are wounds that don't bleed." The wind brushed against the lonely inn, and the innkeeper returned to his gentle routine, carrying with him a stranger's quiet grief. At dawn, snow fell softly over the mountains. He rose from his resting place, beneath a pine tree, shaking the frost from his coat. Another traveler was on the road. He felt it before he saw him. He stepped out of the drifting snow, silent, steady, without menace. The pilgrim flinched at first, but the dog simply stood there, breathing warm clouds into the cold air. He knew these mountains in winter, the hidden valleys, the sudden storms, the wolves that grew hungrier in the cold. And he sensed the weight in the traveler's steps. The pilgrim, nervous but kind, tore a small piece of bread and tossed it gently toward him. The dog lowered his nose to it, sniffed once, and left it untouched. He lifted his head instead, eyes steady. Yes, this was the one he would follow today. He stepped in front of the pilgrim, shook the snow from his coat, and began walking. Not begging, not asking for anything, just choosing. The road disappeared under falling snow, but the black dog never hesitated. He walked a path only he knew, glancing back now and then to make sure the pilgrim still followed. In the quiet snowfall, man and dog walked together, not as owner and beast, but as two travelers, passing through the same season of loneliness. The snow grew heavy. The light faded. The road disappeared, The pilgrim tightened his cloak, and the black dog slowed. Hearing what the man could not. As the wind grew harsh, the dog guided the pilgrim to a small cave, just large enough for the two of them to take refuge. They stepped into the cave together, leaving the snow and the cold behind. Inside the cave, neither of them spoke. One because he could not, the other because he didn't need to. Snow battered the cave's mouth, but the dog kept his eyes open. He watched the white world outside, ears twitching at every shift of wind. The pilgrim fell asleep first. The dog remained awake, as he always did when someone needed him. By morning, the storm had passed. Only a thin veil of snow drifted down, soft enough to melt on their cloaks. The black dog rose first, stretching stiff legs, ears turned toward the path below. The pilgrim followed, still half dreaming, still warmed by the quiet breath that had kept him company in the night. When they reached the ridge, the monastery appeared, quiet, distant, its stone walls pale beneath the morning snow. The pilgrim felt relief wash over him. He turned to thank the dog. But the black dog was already walking away, his paws silent on the soft snow. He did not look back. He never did. He simply disappeared into the white morning, as if the night were merely a wandering spirit's brief duty. The pilgrim stood at the gate, hands folded in silence. He whispered a small prayer, not for himself, but for the black guardian who had walked beside him when no one else did. Above the noise of the marketplace, in a small but tidy and modest house, a scribe lived among parchment and ink. He did not flee the noise. He only kept himself apart. In that town, not everyone could write. So when contracts were made, when soldiers departed, when lovers confessed what they could not say aloud, they came to him. He wrote what others felt, but could not form. Alone, he was unhurried. His thoughts lined up patiently. He erased, rewrote, considered. On parchment, he was certain. But words behave differently when they must be spoken. In conversation, thoughts do not wait their turn, they collide. And he, always searching for the most honest word, often spoke the honest word even when the moment required another. At a town gathering, someone joked lightly. He answered with seriousness, not to correct, but to clarify. The laughter thinned. Someone muttered, "He makes everything heavy." He heard it. Another evening, a grieving man sought comfort. The scribe, meaning kindness, spoke truth about the cost of war. It was accurate. It was untimely. The man turned away. That night, he did not write. He sat in his room, replaying the conversation, as if it were a draft that could be revised. But spoken words do not accept incorrections. He considered leaving the town. Yet each morning, someone knocked. A baker needing terms written clearly. A widow wanting her late husband's last memory preserved. A young girl asking how to phrase a promise. He stayed because someone always needed him to make sure the words could not be mistaken. There was one man who never turned from him. A quiet carpenter. When the scribe spoke too plainly, and the room grew uneasy, the carpenter met his eyes. "You speak what you mean," he would say. "That is not a fault." The carpenter's words lingered, longer than the murmurs did. In time, the scribe understood. He had not misunderstood language. He had only mistaken the moment. He spoke what was true, even when the hour had asked for gentler things. Not everyone welcomed that, but some respected it. He did not soften what he believed, but he learned to let silence come first. He almost answered, then let the words rest. And when he spoke fewer words, and placed them carefully. At the town gathering, laughter broke out again over a passing joke. This time, he did not stiffen. He listened first. And the room did not grow heavy. His writing had always been clear. He had learned to place his words at the proper hour. And between the two, his hand no longer trembled. He still stood between words. Only now, without wavering. Her tower stood upon a wind-struck cliff, where stone met salt and sky. It was built to endure storms. not to dream of distant shores. Within those walls, she had been shaped with precision. Daughter of a house, bearer of alliance, keeper of a lineage she did not choose. Her deep crimson gown fell gracefully to the stone floor. Yet she often felt its invisible stitching pull tighteth on any cord. Her chamber was not lavish, only orderly. Near her bed stood a carved chest, a narrow desk with a single quill, windows opening toward the distant horizon, where the sea meets the fading sky. Everything in its proper place. Everything already decided. Each evening, she stood at the narrow window, watching the horizon dissolve into silver light. It was not land she longed for, but the space beyond certainty. As dusk settled, only the waves broke against the lifts beneath. It pressed softly against the stone, as if listening. In that quiet, she could hear her own breathing. Steady, but not entirely hers. Beneath her bed lay a small parchment map. The sea was painted in patient ultramarine strokes. The far shore remained unmarked. The sea offered no promises. It did not whisper of freedom. It only asked, in the language of waves, who she might be, beyond inherited names. She never answered. Not because she feared it, but because she had only ever spoken in the language of duty. In the corner of her chamber stood a polished metal mirror. It reflected a composed, noble lady. Beneath that image lingered something, unnamed and restless. Her father spoke gently of marriage and strengthened borders. She listened with lowered eyes. Obedience required no courage. Later that evening, a small ring rested upon the table. Its ring was modest. Its meaning was not. She touched it once. Not to claim it, but to feel its cool certainty. It felt heavier than gold. One night, the wind shifted southward. It was warmer than before. It carried salt and distant cries. Like a memory she had yet to live. Her hand trembled. Before she realized, it was not from cold. At dawn, she descended the spiral stairs without proclamation. The air grew saltier with every step. The ancient stone beneath her hand felt indifferent to lineage and law. It had endured many names before hers. Beneath the morning sky, the shore lay pale. No guards barred her path. The tide moved, as it always had, neither welcoming nor warning. A small wooden boat floated quietly beyond the edge of foam, rising and falling with the slow breath of the sea. It bore no crest, no banner, no command. It simply remained there, upon the water, waiting without urgency. The tide moved. The morning light grew brighter. And the boat did not move. The watchman stepped onto the wall after the sun had fully set. His duty always began at the same hour. Below him, the town prepared for sleep. Windows dimmed one by one. The quiet spread slowly, like a blanket pulled over the streets. He checked his old lantern. Whether the oil was enough, whether the flame held steady. Tonight, it felt slightly heavier in his hand. He began his patrol near the gate. Making sure it was locked was the first rule. He tugged once more, out of habit rather than doubt. A chill wind passed over his head. North wind tonight, he thought. It carried the faint scent of distant fields. He listened for the small sounds of night. A stray animal, a late traveler, or simply the wind. Silence, too, was a kind of sound he had learned to hear. At the far end of the wall, he paused briefly. From here, he could see the whole town. It reminded him that every quiet home was part of his watch. He had always been the one to guard the silence of this town. He recalled a rumor he'd overheard at the market. Talk of a thief nearby. Keep your lamps low at night, he had advised. Most people listened, even if they pretended not to. Between the clustered houses, the town felt utterly still. He liked this hour. It felt as though the world paused, just long enough for him to breathe. A faint light glowed from the high church window. He had once seen a monk praying there at night. The memory returned to him, like a soft ember of warmth. A lone dog wandered beneath the wall, its steps lost in the night. Only when the lantern's light brushed it, did its shape briefly appear. A traveler passed nearby. The watchman lifted his lantern, lighting the traveler's way. No words were exchanged, but the small gesture felt enough for both. When the footsteps faded, he was alone once more. Most nights were like this. He had grown comfortable with the company of solitude. He sat at the entrance of the last stretch of the wall, checking his lantern again. The oil was still enough. He preferred certainty over surprise. At the wall's edge, he stood still for a moment, listening to the town's soft, sleeping breath. The quiet felt almost like a presence beside him. He continued walking, unhurried, unwavering. His quiet hours were not yet over. And, as always, he kept those hours faithfully.